It is just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Sean Crabtree of the CrabtreeGroup.com. He's a media personality, podcast host, international speaker, and published author. After earning his BBA in 1991, he began a career in the startup and build-out of what has become one of the largest telecommunication companies in the world. In early 1998, Sean left the corporate arena and has since founded or co-founded 8 successful companies and conducted hundreds of dental training programs all across the United States, Western Canada, and the Caribbean. Sean founded the Crabtree Group with a single vision in mind: to help dentists succeed by business and management acumen rather than trial and error. So, Sean, are you trying to tell me that dentistry is a business?
You know, it unfortunately for some, I know that's a shocker. It is absolutely a business. And, you know this, Howard, the things that you're doing on your channel and all the things that you're trying to teach these young guys out there, dentistry is absolutely a business. And that's probably one of the first things that these guys need to understand right out of the chute.
So how do you go from telecommunications to dentistry? Tell us about your journey of how you ended up in dentistry.
I'm an old guy. You and I were talking about this a moment ago. I'm an old guy. I started out in dentistry. I started out in telecommunications before they called it telecommunications even. They called it cellular telephony back then. As a matter of fact, this is so long ago, Howard, that when you dialed 611, you got Susan at my office, and at 8:30 she went home to the kids. So that's how long ago it was. This was in the late 80s and the early 90s. As the industry changed and so forth, it went to different distribution channels, and I became a corporate trainer for sales and the quality movement for a tri-state area in Tennessee. And the thing that I discovered is the concept of sales that I was, training these 20-something guys on. They already knew the most basic concepts. Nobody buys on price. It's all based on value. How do you create value? All of those things. And in dentistry, that was unheard of. So for a young guy, 10 years out of college, that was a really enticing opportunity to bring something that previous to that, I thought, when I started with the company, it was called Cellular One. We were owned by a group of attorneys out of New Jersey. I don't know if you know how all of that worked, but it was based on a spectrum buyout and so forth. And so we became a franchise of the Cellular One organization. And then, of course, we got bought out, and we got bought out, and we got bought out. And it got to the point where, we were just completely corporatized. When I first started, there were 6 of us. We made all the decisions. And like I said, Susan was customer care, in my office. And then it became just completely corporatized to the point that when I left, it was GTE MobileNet. And about a week after that, they were bought by Verizon. When I started, there were 6 of us. When I left GTE MobileNet, there were 695,000 employees worldwide. And it was just completely corporatized. So anyway, that was very exciting for me to bring this concept that I thought everybody knew. All these people that I would interact with all knew these concepts. When I got to dentistry, it was just brand new.
But how did you pick dentistry out of all the industries?
Well, because of that, really. Not to pick on dentistry, but healthcare in general, I think is, and that's a good point. Healthcare in general, I think, is behind when it comes to the concept of, we call it treatment acceptance. In other areas, they call it sales, right? Dentistry is behind in terms of how to create value. I'll tell you a quick story. Years ago, through a client of mine, it's a long story, but the practice management guys at the University of Nebraska at Omaha called me to come in and speak to their 4th-year urology guys. This is interesting group of people, Howard. But at any rate, They hired me to come in and speak. This is before Obamacare and all this other stuff. They hired me to come in and speak. And of course, they knew, what I was about. They knew through my client what it is that we do and so forth. And so I was probably halfway through my presentation, and I could just tell I was talking about marketing. I was talking about sales and this concept of creating value with patients and treatment acceptance. And these guys were just giving me these wrinkled up noses. And finally, I just, right in the middle of the thing, I stopped and said, guys, I don't understand. I mean, is there a problem with what I'm saying? And immediately everybody in the room turned and looked to the guy in the back of the room, the old guy with the gray hair. And he said, Sean, we're, as urologists, we don't consider ourselves in sales, and certainly we're above the concept of business and marketing. And I just about fell out of my, I didn't know what to think about that. They were looking at this as, this is not who they are. This is not what they do. They didn't look at themselves as marketing to general practitioners and so forth. And of course, if you fast forward, then you see that, in my opinion, medicine is way behind dentistry even, because these guys, they just have completely given up all authority to the insurance companies. And then, of course, you see what happened. And not to get political, but, there for a while I was thinking that dentistry was going to be in the crosshairs as well. And who knows? I mean, it may be down the road. But, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal several years ago about I don't know if you read this article, but it started on the front page. This is back when the journal was wide, not narrow. And the article was basically that for the first time in the history of the American Dental Association, the American Medical Association, the median income of a general dentist was $25,000 higher than the median income of a general practitioner in medicine. And they attributed it to the fact, people like me, and the fact that dentists understand that, the majority of them understand that they're in business and they need to take authority and control over creating value. And it's not about just relinquishing everything to the insurance companies. So I went a little long on that answer. I don't even remember what your question was, but I love to talk, as you can tell.
Well, it's the two sickest unhealthy industries in America and really around the world is always government and healthcare. And I'm proud of the dentists, because the dentists, the vets, and the chiropractors are significantly more sophisticated than the physicians. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I like to network with the physicians, and when I got a printout just a few weeks ago of all the physicians in my area, and I wanted to go to lunch with like each one of them, and I'd say 80% of their dental websites didn't even have an email address or a contact form. So I had to send my assistant Rebecca in person in her car. It took her 3 days to drive around to all these doctors' offices and give her my business card and say, hey, Howard wants to go to lunch or dinner with you or whatever. And, I mean, just crazy. But, you come to where I am in Phoenix, all the dentists, chiropractors, vets, commercial locations, you can see their sign from the road. The physicians, oh my God, it's just completely insane. In fact, when Bill Clinton, when he was president, he was saying he wanted to add 100,000 police officers to the streets. And I wrote him this long letter saying, oh my God, talk about a waste of time. You need to get 100,000 people in government to get their MBA. And if 100,000 government, if that was the mandate, to get 100,000 career government employees to get their MBA, the economy would be so much better. There'd be so much less poverty and crime. But it's crazy. But back to healthcare and sales, it's sad because when you look at the insurance data, for every 100 cavities diagnosed, the dentist only drill, fill, and bill 38. And I think that, that you're not a good dentist if only 1 out of 3 of your patient gets their cavity fixed. And back to these urologists, if you can't convince grandpa to get this treatment, you're not helping him. And if you just say you need blah 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 blah, and 2 out of 3 people don't go good with treatment, you're not a good physician. You're not a good urologist. And I've seen so many medical dental buildings where there's 7 dentists in there, and 6 of them are doing 750, taking home 175. And then
I've
one
heard.
guy in there is doing, $1,000,003, taking home 300. And the only difference is they got the same number of ops and charts and everything. It just one guy can convince 2 out of 3 patients to get their cavity fixed, and everybody else is getting 1 out of 3 fixed. And then they want to go to these CE courses that teach them how to do fillings. I'm like, dude, you'd be a better dentist if you just removed all the decay and packed them with butter. I mean, get rid of it's sales is a 4-letter word in dentistry. How do you break that?
Well, you know what? Now the good news is I've seen it change. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, and when I first started, I couldn't even use the word sales. I had to get creative to find a different word to be able to use, because people just got so turned off. I think my experience is, it's still bad. Don't get me wrong. I was speaking in Kansas City recently, and I can still tell when I I always ask permission. If this is going to shock you, if I'm going to, if I use the word sales and that's going to shock you, let me know right now. And I can tell now, early on, I would ask those things and people would go, oh yeah, that's freaking me out. Now, at least they don't say anything. Now I can still tell it's there, but they don't say anything. I think the education has changed. I think you're doing a tremendous amount of work. You've been at this for a lot of years, and everything that you're doing is definitely, one of the things that you guys had asked me early on is, what advice would I have for young dentists? It's totally make use of guys like you and all this free content out there to understand that maybe, they need to have a paradigm shift. Dentistry is a business. I'll tell you a quick story. Probably 15 years ago, I was speaking in Mississippi. Now, I wouldn't tell that story on your show unless it had been that long ago. There were probably 850 doctors in the room. And in the front of the room, I said, I was trying to get them to understand that the clinical aspects of your dentistry only make up about 25% of your success. And there was a guy, it was all the way in the very back of the room, like right in the corner of the aisle so I could see him right there. And he raised his hand in the very back of the room. And he says, I don't agree with this at all. I've got the best hands in the state of Mississippi. Now, of course, when he said that, every doctor in the room turned around and looked at him because that was a pretty bold statement. But, I asked him in front of the room, why did you get into the dentistry? I'm not making this up. He said, I got into dentistry because I'm really good with my hands. I've never enjoyed people. And, I knew I could make a lot of money in dentistry, and that's why I got into dentistry, because of my hands.
He should have been a carpenter.
That's exactly right.
You should have told him Jesus was a carpenter. Why don't you go work in construction? Yeah.
The unfortunate part is, I tried to work with him and he didn't make it. He actually got out of dentistry.
Well, you work in a tough neighborhood. When you're living in Tennessee, you're lecturing in Kansas City, you're in Mississippi. That's conservative. There's more.
Listen, man. I'm in New York, Chicago. Now, there's no doubt we're in Alabama. I've worked with clients in Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Barbados, Nassau. All over the U.S. and outside of the U.S. The funny thing is, and this is not going to surprise you at all, but it may be surprise some of your listeners. The thing that we hear is, that stuff may work, Sean, in Florida, but this is New York. This is Manhattan. This is a blue collar town, or vice versa. That may work in Canada, but this is America. That may work in America. This is Canada. The thing I've learned is that you can have whatever it is that you want. You just have to be willing to get past what's going on in your head. You have to be willing to get past. Unfortunately, I think dental school, as you and I talked, is way ahead of a lot of maybe medical situations, but these guys are not given what they need to be able to run a business. I tell you what, Michael Gerber, who, I got lots of heroes, and Gerber is certainly one of those guys. He's made himself a fortune on the whole series of the E-Myth. I don't know if you probably know all about that, but one of the things he says is America's the greatest country on earth. Anybody who really enjoys making great Italian food can open a restaurant. The problem is, according to the SBA, about 68% of those businesses are living literally a couple of paychecks away from losing it, because at the end of the day, the guy who opened the Italian restaurant really opened it for one reason, because he enjoyed making Italian food. And that's not what runs a business. Making great Italian food doesn't run a business, and being great at dentistry, unfortunately, doesn't make you a successful dental business. So that's why I always start out with number one, you are in business. And the quicker you come to that realization, then you can go to some of the other stuff. Our belief is that your dental practice is not your job. Your dental practice is your vehicle to get you what it is that you want. That's the vehicle that can create for you the income, and it's a wonderful income in dentistry. Dentists have the ability to make a tremendous income, and they should, because of what they do. But you can have your income, you can still, be in a position to manage your time and not have just crumbs left over for your wife and your kids. And you can have whatever it is that you want in dentistry, but you have to realize I'm in business, and my clinical skills are not going to get me the success that I need, unfortunately. I'll tell you one more story real quick. I had a young doctor contact me. He had talked to, this has been several months ago, he had talked to somebody who I'd worked with for many, many years. And he was just down in the dumps. This young guy, he said, when I was a fourth-year dental student, I did all my research. I would go travel to these places on my own dime because I wanted to find exactly the right practice for me to get into when I'm at that point. He found a place. It was in a small town. This doctor was extremely successful, very well known. And the young guy was struggling bad. He had bought it about 6 months previous to calling me, and he said, I don't understand. I did all my homework. I did all my research. Everybody in this town loves this doctor. By all accounts, he's successful. And I spent the last 6 months of my time redoing what I think is really bad dentistry. I'm not making any money. But yet, and I got to, I'm not getting the reputation that this guy's getting. Now, of course, that's the other side of the coin. But the only point I'm trying to make is, if you're great clinically, or if you're not great clinically, you can be successful without being great clinically, unfortunately, and you can be terribly unsuccessful and still be great clinically, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you walk into a dental office and you're back there in their break room talking to them, they got their mail and they get these letters from, like a real estate agent. Behind the real estate agent, it says that this real estate agent has a CA and a SSD and all blah, 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 blah. And I asked the dentist, do you know what any of that means? And they don't know what any of it means. I said, well, look at your card. It says DMD, MAGD, DICOI. It's just bullshit. And then you go to your website and you have all this alphabet soup behind your name. Nobody knows what the shit it even is. And then your picture looks like a mugshot off of a police station. Where's your 2-minute YouTube video where you're making me feel something? You're like, hey, come on down to Sean Crabtree's dental office in Winchester, Tennessee. We're just an hour south of Nashville, and I swear I know you're afraid of the dentist, but that's why I went to dental school. And I know you're afraid of the cost, and that's why Valerie up front will just make it all. She'll help you with payments, and they just want to go chase more alphabet soup crap behind their name and get their diplomat and who gives a shit, and it doesn't affect their business.
Well, and again, as a young dentist, the number one thing you can do is take advantage of Howard Farran and listen to the experience that's coming through that microphone.
Well,
And
tell us though what you. I mean, you're all over. You're lecturing, consulting from coast to coast. The person listening right now is by themselves in a car on an hour commute to work, and she's wondering like what are the problems out there? Who tell us like when you're getting calls for help, like what are like the top three? Like what's the number one category? What would be second? What would be third or fourth? What are you hearing out in the field?
man, that's a really good question. The number one thing, okay, the number one thing I get is, you know what, Sean, I just can't get enough new patients. If I could get okay, great example. Had an office that just contacted me. This particular office was in Missouri. If we just had more new patients, man, our business would grow like crazy. Well, so let me ask you what you're doing. We're doing about $1.6 million. Okay. So how many new patients do you see in a month? 90. 90 new patients a month. You're doing $1.6 million. Holy crap. Now, you don't have to be in dentistry for very long to understand. If you're seeing 90 new patients a month, you're doing $1.6 million, you don't have a new patient problem. You've got a value problem. And that is probably the number one challenge that we see. Now, I understand what the challenge is, and it's not completely limited to dentistry. I think there are other small businesses in America who don't understand the concept of how to create value. I mean, this is true for attorneys and CPAs across the board. You got to understand that most basic concept. We as human beings, you and I, Howard, and everybody listen to this, we buy everything based on our perception of what the value is. Now, we justify on logical things. Maybe we justify because we think we got a good deal. We justify because of safety or logic or whatever. But we buy what we see value in. And so the concept of learning to create value is really, really important. Unfortunately, it's a snowball effect. Because if I'm in dentistry or CPA or attorney, whatever it is, if I don't understand the concept of creating value and I present my treatment plan and the patient, because they don't see value, the immediate response is, what does my insurance cover or how much does that cost? Then over time, I'm getting beat over the head with that concept, that brick called, I can't afford it or whatever it is. Then you start to retract a little bit. And now you got a whole different set of problems because you're not presenting the entire treatment plan. You don't understand the concept of value. So now you're presenting, the first step. Well, now you're snowballing the whole thing because every time the patient comes in, they're getting nickel and dimed, not to mention the whole concept of patient care and all that other stuff. So I think that is probably the number one thing is, I have to understand the concept of why we as human beings, not just patients, buy anything. And I have to understand that as a dentist, my responsibility is to create value and have that patient understand the value. And to be able to do that, I got to find out what is it that they want emotionally, where is it that they want to go, and then I can show them how my treatment plan, which is an entire comprehensive treatment plan, is going to get them where it is that they want to go. That is probably the number one thing. The number two thing.
Can I interrupt you right there on one thing? If you've been listening to my show, I think this is like episode like 900. If you've been listening to my show, if you've only listened to it 10 times, you already know what I'm going to say. Did you hear what he just said? He said a dentist called him, was doing 1.6 million. This is what I call the consultant bias, because the average dental office only does 750.
That's right.
But if you talk to consultants and say, well, what does the average dental office do? I don't know, 1 to 2 million. That's because people who use consultants are the big dogs. And if I went and got the average revenue of everybody who buys all this high technology stuff and gets all this alphabet soup crap behind their name, they only do 750. But every single dentist I know that does between $2 and $4 million a year, by the time they're my age, 55, they've used a half dozen consultants because they know the return on investment of a consultant is the number one thing. They get their house poised, and when they go buy a CBCT or chairside milling or whatever, they pay cash. Exactly. They're at the convention. They hand them their American Express, and you can see it there. It's in America, only 10% of the cars 10% of the houses are bought in cash, and you go on those convention floor, only about 10% of those CBCTs, CAD cams, or whatever are bought on an American Express card. You get your house in order first. I mean, it's just a no-brainer. So what was number 2?
Well, and just to add to what you're saying, not only are those guys in the top, 700,000 is the average. I don't know what the average for overhead is.
65.
I was going to say higher than that, actually. A lot of the guys that first come to us, their overhead is in the 70 plus percentile, unfortunately. We try to get that down to below 55%. It's not uncommon for us to see a 50% or 48%, overhead situation.
Holy moly! Well, let's just stop there. How do you? My homies are listening. Their ears are perked up. Their ear just knocked their rearview mirror over 5 degrees. How do you get overhead down from 70 to 55? Because there's only 2 ways to do it. If all my rent, mortgage, equipment, labor, lab supply, if all that is $1 a month, and I do $1 a month in sales, I have 100% overhead. If I get my sales to $2, my overhead's 50%. So do you sell your way out of it by do you get it from 70 to 55 by increasing revenue, or do you do it the other way? Say, well, you only got $1 revenue and $1 expenses. Let's get the expenses down, cut in half. So do you do it by growing revenue or cutting cost?
Absolutely by growing revenue. But growing revenue is also a concept of managing time. And if I'm a dentist, I have to understand that my chair time is much like a hotel. If I'm the Renaissance Marriott and I don't have room 102 filled for September 20th, 2017, if that's gone, I never get it back. I mean, it's gone forever. So for me, it's never about cutting overhead. Certainly, I would want you to manage the overhead, but it's never about cutting salaries. I think it's probably the other way around. In a lot of cases, I think there's opportunity for salary increases, but that's a whole another conversation. It's all about increasing revenue. It's about managing time and revenue. And let's take this one concept of treatment acceptance. If I have to bring a patient in 5 times to get the treatment completed, and it's a diagnosis every single time, forget all of the downside of the patient being nickel and dime to death and all of that. It's the other side of it is my chair time is worth less. Now, if I present comprehensive dentistry, I have my patients see value in that comprehensive dentistry, they accept that comprehensive dentistry, we get it all done in one visit, all of a sudden the time is worth much more, tremendously much more. I had a client in Michigan in an economically depressed area of Michigan. It's in Warren, Michigan. He and I have worked together for probably I've been working with him for maybe 15 years, 14 years, something like that. The interesting thing was, and this is what I was going to go with number 2, he didn't hire me to grow his business. He hired me because the people on his team were not on the same page. And so he had already gotten rid of the entire team once before, which I wouldn't recommend. But he had already done that before he hired me, had a whole new set of people there, a whole new team. And it was going south again. These guys were not coming together. They weren't. All of it was coming back to him, and he was getting sick of it. He hired me to get these guys on the same page. The interesting thing happened is that when we first started working together and we started creating this concept where everybody on the team has an area of responsibility and the doctor's given them the authority to make decisions, we have game plans, and we're all supporting a common vision. Now all of a sudden, in 14 months, this was not the goal, he grew nearly $1 million. Grew nearly $1 million in Warren, Michigan in 14 months. That wasn't the goal. It was actually what happened, or the result of the concept of getting these guys together on the same page. It is not uncommon. We're about to run into fourth quarter of the year. It is not uncommon that in November, late October, maybe early December, our clients will come to us and say, my accountant is just really excited about, the growth that we're having, and he's perplexed because he doesn't see an increase in marketing expenditures. He sees a decrease in terms of days worked. He doesn't see an increase in labor costs. And he can't see how it is that we've grown this thing so that the overhead is where it is and the profitability is where it is. And unfortunately, that's the way you do it. It's based on the concept of being clear about where it is that you're trying to go, having the people on your team have areas of responsibility and accountability, but also authority to be able to make decisions. That's when all of a sudden 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. 1 + 1 can equal 4. And so you're able to grow your profitability, which makes the overhead look lower.
Well, all humans are their own worst enemy. I mean, so many famous people have said it's easier to conquer another country than it is your own self. They have self-limiting beliefs. I mean, you see it all day long where they just say, well, when you come in, today we're going to do the 2 fillings on the right side, and then we'll have you come back and do the 2 fillings on the left side. And right next door to him is an oral surgeon that pulls all 4 wisdom teeth all day, 8 times a day, 5 days a week for 40 years. Same day dentistry. I mean, even if you haven't even looked at your schedule and someone just needs a filling or a crown, and you say, and when you're doing the hygiene exam, would you like to do that today? And then they'll say, well, I can't because all my rooms are filled. I don't have an extra room. Well, solve that problem. And you'll say, well, I have a patient coming in 10 minutes, and that room's set up, and they don't have another room, so they have at the door, and then their next patient doesn't show up. I mean, they don't even have capacity. They don't understand their costs. By the time they pay them, the ADA, the American Dental Association, says overhead 65% on average. So if 1/3, 35% goes to dentists, 25% goes to staff, 10% labs, 6% supplies, 5% rent, 3% marketing, and what are they waiting for? A frickin' operatory, which isn't even big enough to make the P&L sheet as a line item. They have if they just got rid of if they just got capacity, so they always had at least one room that no one even sat in one time a day, just keep adding operatories. And another thing, you say, well, I don't have time to do the filling. Well, yeah, because you got to pick up the patient and move them to another room. Why don't you tell the hygienist to go start her patient in the next room? They'll say, oh, that room doesn't have a cavitron. Well, fix that. Every airplane at Southwest Airlines is exactly identical. And then I go in these dental offices, they can't even add $100 filling to do it right now, knock it out in 5 minutes so mom doesn't have to come back, because the hygienist can only do a cleaning in room 1. In fact, many of them psychologically can't even fathom doing a cleaning in another room because they're platonically married to an archaic object. And then you ask the receptionist, what is your title? Front desk. I was named after a piece of furniture. And the hygienist, my name's room 1. So she's a piece of furniture and I'm room 1. And I couldn't imagine. I couldn't imagine doing a cleaning in room 2. So, so many self-limiting beliefs. So what would be number 3? You said number 1. So recap, what was number 1?
This concept of creating value is number 1. Number 2, in my view, is getting your people on the same page. And of course, that's a shortcut way of saying, I'm not, this is going to sound like I'm picking on dentists. I'm not. I mean, these guys get out of school and they have zero training on the concepts of leadership or communication or any of that kind of thing. And, there are lots of great people in dentistry, lots of very caring people in dentistry. And unfortunately, the doctors don't give them the authority to be able to have their voice heard. Nobody knows what's going on in the hygiene department like the hygienist. Nobody knows what's going on at the front desk like, the receptionist. And so giving those guys the authority, I think it was Deming who said that the person who's closest to the end user should have the authority to be able to make decisions in those areas. And that's a huge piece of it. Getting them aligned behind where it is that we're trying to go. Who is it? How is it? What is it that we're trying to be? Getting them aligned behind that, and then giving them the authority, responsibility, and then hold them accountable for coming up with plans to be able to support that so that all areas of the practice are sort of cylinders firing on the same engine.
But you say that, but when I ask 100 dentists, what is the most stressful part of your life? They always say the staff. Yep. So how do you get this guy who had the personality to sit in the library and get A's in calculus and biochemistry to now be this I mean, they're listening to you saying, man, you're tall, handsome, charismatic, you got this personality. Hell yeah, it's easy for you. But dude, you didn't get a 4.0 in calculus. I'm a library nerd geek who sat in the library. How do you get that personality to be a charismatic people person selling dentistry and leading a team? Because when you go in a dental office, I swear to God, after they're done with their root canal, every single time they walk back to their private office and shut the door. And then when I watch every single sporting event like basketball, soccer, football, the coach is engaged. He's on the
Yeah.
sideline. He's totally up front. And that dentist, when I get done with the patient, I'll check him out because I want to see who's in the waiting room. I'm talking to the people. I'm cutting jokes. If I'm running late, I own it. I apologize with the
And it's
patient.
okay when you do that too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. With the patient, I'm saying, I'm sorry. Harold, he only comes in when he's in pain, and he showed up on my door today. And don't be mad at me. You should beat up Harold right now. And Harold's like waving his hands, like sorry. And but they're not like that. They're hiding in their office with the door shut.
Yeah. In an ideal world, I mean, everything you say is true, but I don't think all of that's necessary. I don't think you have to be a charismatic guy. I think it helps. And obviously, if you can be like you and do that kind of thing, I mean, there's no doubt about that. To me, I think it's much more about just putting your heart out there, communicating openly. I don't think you have to be a tall, charismatic guy to be successful in business, but I do think you have to be willing to put your heart out there. And if you are going back there and closing the door and shut yourself off from the world until the next patient, you're missing the opportunities to grow your business. There's no doubt about it. I can tell you something else too. A lot of these guys who are not gregarious, let's say, you know what? A lot of times they've got people on their team who are, and that's okay. Give them the authority to be that. And let's create this culture where you can be, the guy that maybe doesn't have. And I've had a lot of those guys. I've had a lot of those guys who maybe don't have the best, shall we say, bedside manner, but they know their stuff clinically and so forth. Well, listen, there's nothing wrong with putting you in a position where your patients are making relationships with your team, and you're the guy who's making the diagnosis and solving their problems and tying that to where it is that they want to go emotionally, having them see value in that, and then you go to the next patient, but the relationships are all based on your team. I'm not saying that's ideal, but I'm saying that works. And you have the opportunity to do that, but you have to be able to give authority up. And that is a whole different, I know that you run into that too.
You got to delegate, and humans are by they're hardwired to be controlling. I mean, you're going to survive better if you control your environment. So they're hardwired at birth to be controlling, and they can be very controlling. It's one of the top reasons, people are dysfunctional is controlling. But you know what you just said is opposites attract, and you see it all the time. Like
Yeah.
you can
Yes.
walk in dental offices where the introvert geek hires a bunch of introvert geeks because likes and he's familiar with that. But you look in sports, like if I'm the Carolina Panthers, I don't need a quarterback. I've already got Cam Newton. I'm going to look for what I need, and I see it with ethnic dentists. Like say they were born in India, right here in my town. You go into some offices and you literally think you went through a door and you're in New Delhi.
Right. That's
Everybody's in
exactly.
there from India. Everybody's got broken English, the everything, and you're just like, whoa. And then you go into
And
other
you limit your patient base by doing that. Yeah.
and then you go into other Indian dentists that are, say, West Phoenix, where it's heavily Hispanic, and you walk in there, and the only Indian in the office is the dentist, and everybody in there is bilingual, speaking Spanish, blah blah. So yeah, if you can't lead 5 ducks to a pond, and you can't sell, a heater to an Eskimo, you need to hire staff that can compensate you. And if you're the visionary, well, you don't need another visionary. You need someone in operations logistics. If you already know I'm going to leave
Right.
Phoenix and drive to your place in Winchester, Tennessee, I don't need another visionary to tell me we're going to drive. I already know that. I need people who are going to say, are we going to fly, drive a bus? Are we going to walk? Take a train? I need logistics people.
We should hire our staff like we choose our spouses. I mean, if you think about it, you said opposites attract. I saw a psychologist once who said that, We marry people not because of their strengths, but because of our own weaknesses. And so if you look at your spouse, 9 times out of 10, they bring something to the table in terms of their strengths that you have weaknesses in. We should manage and hire people in the same way. The worst thing you can do is have a whole bunch of people who are just like you. And it doesn't matter what your personality style is. If everybody on the team is just like you, you're limiting yourself. There's no doubt about that. So, so first of all, it's about creating value. Secondly, it's about getting a team of people who are clearly aligned behind a vision. You as the dentist figure out where it is that you want to be, get your staff's input for that. Who is it? How is it? What is it? Where is it that they want to be? Give them a reason that's bigger than a paycheck or patients to come in, and get them aligned behind that, and then give them responsibility, and then give them authority, and then hold them accountable for coming to the table with plans about what they think needs to happen. You can lead that. As you said, there's a strong desire to lead. You can still lead that, but allow them to come to the table with their ideas, because they're closest to the situations. So getting your team aligned behind that is probably the second biggest thing. The third biggest thing, real quick, and this is a big one. This is a big one. And you've talked about it before. This is a big one. Every time I cut a video on this, I get somebody who challenges me on this. You have got to be as easy to do business with as who you're competing against. I got to realize in dentistry, I'm not competing against other dentists. I'm competing against, other competition, other stores, other businesses who are after the same discretionary dollars that I'm after. So what I say all the time is, you've got to be as easy to do business with as buying a giant flat screen TV. Here's the challenge, Howard. There are plenty of people who woke up before the Mayweather fight, and they said, you know what, I've been eyeing that big 4K flat screen, ultra thin TV, whatever, for the man cave, and the fight is coming up this weekend. Man, today is the day I'm gonna go buy that flat screen TV. And they walk into the big box store, they sign their name, and they walk out with the giant TV. Very few people wake up in the morning and go, you know what? I have been dying to get that root canal, that implant, fill in the blank, done, and today, baby, is the day. Very few people do that. We have to become as easy to do business with financially as those that we're competing against. And so the concept of third-party financing, I think, is the greatest gift that has ever been given to dentistry. I don't understand why it's not utilized more. I don't understand why dentists are not absolutely just clamoring for that. I mean, I'm sure there was a time in dentistry where the dentist's goal was to, maybe have as many people as possible paying them $20 a month or whatever the situation is. You don't have to do that. You don't have to be that. I was speaking at Michigan, or maybe it was the midwinter, not long ago, and I always try to listen to some of the other speakers. There was a finance guy there that I popped my head in, and I caught him right as he was opening this sentence. He said, do you have any idea what the top 3 lenders in the United States of America are? In other words, in terms of priority, who is owed the most money? Okay. Number 1 was obviously banking and lending institutions are owed the most money. Number 2 was motor credit, Honda Motor Credit, Ford Motor Credit, these kinds of things. Number 3 were dentists. Dentists in the U.S. are the number 3 owed businesses in the country. There's no reason for that. There's no reason under the sun. Not to mention the fact that when your patients owe you money, that prevents the next step in the process from happening. There's Care Credit, there's Lending Club, there's Wells Fargo, there's City Health, I mean, the list goes on. At any given time, there are 15 companies out there that are clamoring. There's a great one out there called Green Sky that has just come on the scene, man. They are making major headway. There are plenty of companies, is the point, that's out there to loan, that are eager to make dentistry affordable for your patients. Why in the world would you try to collect even $1,000 from your patient when all they have to do is sign their name, just like they would if they were buying a flat screen television? There's just no reason for it. It's good for the patient. It's good for the team. It's good for your bottom line profitability. There's no reason not to not only embrace third-party financing, but make it a starting point. You know, I walk into some of these offices that we're just starting to work with, or maybe they have us in to do an analysis, and they've got $385,000 in accounts receivable. I mean, there's just no reason for that. And these guys are doing, you know, a lot of guys are doing this in-house thing, and you know, where they're financing it in-house. My question would be, why? If you've got 15 companies that are itching, clamoring, and chomping at the bit to offer financing to your patients, they've got recourse. That's their business. Why in the world would you extend yourself in that scenario? And I know what you're thinking. You know, some of these guys are listening are going to go, well, because, you know, maybe the patients don't have credit. Well, then fix that. You know, go get a higher level of clientele, or, you know, figure out your marketing strategy, or bring in co-signers, focus on it. There's no reason that in 2017 you have to be putting yourself out there so you got $500,000 that's owed to you. It's just can you imagine another business? Can you imagine another business that operates with $500,000 that's owed to them? I mean, it just doesn't happen, and there's no reason for it. You got to be as easy to do business with as buying a flat screen television. I didn't mean to get carried away on that one, Howard, but that is the number 3 biggest missed opportunity that we see.
I want to switch to operation logistics for a second. You've worked with, there's someone listening right now. She's driving to work. She's working as an associate somewhere. She's going to do a de novo startup practice. What practice management software do you recommend?
Boy, that's a good question. You know, I don't know. Probably there's one that I recommend that maybe you've never heard of, but I can tell you maybe a better answer would be.
What's the one what one is that?
You know, I don't know if I want to say that just yet. You put me on the spot here, Howard. I don't know if I want to release that yet.
Yeah, do it. It's Dentistry Uncensored.
There is a software called Edison that is, in my 20 years of working in dentistry, it is the only software that I've seen that approaches dentistry from a business perspective. It's called Edison, and everything about it is designed with dental business acumen in mind. You know, you speak of the big ones that you see, Soft Dent. You know, what's some other ones? Easy Dental. I mean, what do you guys use, Howard?
Open Dental.
There's a bunch out there. The challenges that I've seen with a lot of these things is they're not laid out in a business way. For example, if I walk into a practice and I say, let's take a look at we just mentioned accounts receivable. Let me take a look at your accounts receivable. So they print out a report, and there's, 40 pages. And the last page, it has a breakdown, and it says, okay, total owed is $68,000. And you go back and you look at over 30, over 60, over 90, and, over 60 is a negative, $40,000. Over 90 is a negative number. Well, you and I both know you can't have a negative accounts receivable. You have accounts payable and you have accounts receivable. So, what they're doing is they take accounts receivable and they go, okay, you got this many patients that have credits, you have this many patients that owe you money, so the net is this. Well, that doesn't tell you accounts receivable. That tells you what the net dollars are. If you want to know what your accounts receivable are, you need to know what are the patients that owe you money. And that's just one example. It's kind of been a major pet peeve of mine over the years, because when I come in and I'm analyzing an office and I print out the AR report, even if, and some of the softwares will allow you to pull out any dollars that are negative.
What's the website?
I really don't know that I should have. I don't know that these guys are out there in a very public way yet. It was developed by a group out of Missouri, and I don't know that they're out in a very public way. As a matter of fact, you may get me in all kinds of trouble, Howard.
Is it a dentist in Missouri?
It's a company called Getsy Dental.
Oh, Getsy. Oh, they sell supplies in the Midwest, like Omaha, Kansas City, St. Louis. Yeah.
They're in about 9 states. They're not simply a supply company, but yeah, they've developed a really good software.
What do you mean they're not simply a supply company?
They take a consultative approach, and we're working closely with those guys. I really like what it is that they have going on, and
they're headquartered out of Kansas City, right?
Right out of Kansas City. Yeah.
That's where I went to dental school.
Is that right?
Yeah, I love Kansas City. My God,
I love Kansas City too, and I love those guys at Getsy. And I did not ask their permission, so you may have me in a lot of trouble here. Howard.
So that's a family business, right?
It is a family business. How did we get back on this? You got me in all kinds of trouble.
No.
It's wrong, man. You got us uncensored. No kidding here.
So what?
I see you smiling, Howard.
I think it's like 100-year-old family business, isn't it?
Over 100 years.
So what? So who's the leader of the pack now? Who's what generation is it on?
Don Brunker and his son Ben Brunker is, I think, 5th generation.
Don Brunker, Brunker.
Yep.
And
that's right.
he's the CEO right now.
Yep.
5th generation, yep. And his son's name is what?
I think Don is 4th, and I think Ben is 5th. Yeah.
Ben Brunker, Brunker.
Yes.
So they're acting more consultative now, you say?
Yeah, I mean they really get some of the concepts that you're talking about. They understand that it's not about dollars and cents in terms of a nickel or two on cotton rolls. I mean they understand that their role. I mean you can't be in business over 100 years, right? Unless you understand some things that a lot of folks don't understand. And those guys really get that, their role is to help the doctors be the very best that they can be. And so they see themselves not as a sales rep for supplies, but they see themselves more as strategists for their dental clients.
Yeah, and it's amazing how there's, you got Patterson and Shine, which are publicly traded. And right. And then you have these family deals like Benco is 3rd generation family owned. Getsy's, if you count Ben, it's 5th generation family owned. And then Burkhart, that's another American story. She's the daughter there is 4th generation. Have you met her?
No, I haven't.
And what's amazing is how they all of them, every single one of those, Patterson and Shine, begged them both to buy them. And they remind me of In-N-Out Burger. In-N-Out Burger has been asked by every corporate restaurant group, whether it be Yums that owns all these categories, and they say, man, you only have 1,100 stores, and you're basically just in California and Arizona and the West Coast. Let us buy you, and we'll roll you out to 50 states. And they go, you know what? I don't trust that you'll keep the vision. I don't trust the Wall Street. I don't want this false god where if I miss my earnings per share by a penny, you're going to beat me up. So I've got to cut back on quality products and quality organic, locally grown produce. And I don't want to. I wasn't born to worship the gods of Wall Street, where if I don't give them every single penny they demand, they're going to slaughter me. And I really I think it's what also bothers me is the Fortune 500 only employs 17% of America, and they get about 99% of all the business press, and the other 83% work for a mom and pop family business, and we're the absolute backbone of every economy of every country, going back to the Great Wall of China and the pyramids. But they only want to talk about Apple and Uber and all these bullshit companies. And I'll tell you what, if you're a PhD economist and you had to say, would you like the Fortune 500 to do 10% better and small family business do 10% worse? Or do you want that reverse? They'll always say, I want the family business to do the best. That's the backbone of the economy.
That is the backbone of America.
The average company in America has less than 25. In fact, has less than 25 employees. In fact, a dental office is pretty much the perfect median mode size business in America. That's right. Dental office you're consulting with, that's the average company of America, not General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, Apple, and Xerox, and GE, and all these
and they
companies.
employ more people than anybody else in America.
I mean, and if they pick up 10% gains in employment there, my God, you have 0% unemployment. I mean, it's crazy.
Right. That's exactly right.
So, so you like that? You like the practice management software from Getsy Dental?
Edison, I love it.
And it's called Edison, and they own that, and they own that locked box and sterile, and own the programmers and all that stuff.
It's theirs, and it's the only software that I've run across in the 20 years that I've been doing this that is built specifically with the business acumen in mind. It's very straightforward.
Are you friends with Don Brunker?
I am.
Well, tell him to get his Kansas City butt on my show and the podcast, and tell everybody. I probably haven't seen him for 10 years. He had me come lecture at all of his groups a couple times, like a 5-city tour. I think back in like 1990 and again in like 2000. But tell him to come on the show and tell us about Edison. I
will absolutely do that.
But I don't like the name Edison because didn't it take 10,000 attempts to make the light bulb? Will we have to be on version 10,000.1 before it works?
These guys have been at it a lot of years. Yeah. I let the cat out of the bag here with you, Howard.
And I can tell you another thing. I've had 5 programmers since 1998, so it's coming up 19 years. And watching the journey of programmers, the tools that programmers have, they can program 10 times faster today.
Oh yeah. There's
than 20 years ago. So, so some of these
snap of a finger. I mean, literally.
Yeah, I would like to talk to him about this because I have some serious feedback on practice management software. One being that operational logistics. You go into Hertz Rent-A-Car and return your car. They got a handheld deal, and they can check my car in 5 steps, 5 minutes. You go into the Hilton. There's like 7 things they ask, they hook you in. You get on a piece of crap software like Dentrix, or EagleSoft, or SoftDent, or all of them. That poor receptionist opens up the window and there's like 40,000 million trillion features. So it's overwhelmed. So then she misses the 3 crucial steps. They need to have an X out box. You decide how you're going, when someone calls, what you're going to ask and do. And then when they check in, what you're going to ask and do. And when they check out, what you're going to ask and do. And then close out all the other shit. So that the screen, and it's got to be connected to the phone so that when you call me up, it pulls up. Sean Crabtree from the CrabtreeGroup.com, Winchester, Tennessee. Hi, Sean, how are you? And not Xing out of all this crap and trying to find it. So there's, and then those consultants will tell you that when you go into a dental office and run the report generator, about 83% of all the software has never been used once. And that is a huge ball and chain negative. And then I run the report to see who you were referred by, and she forgot that step. Yeah. I'm trying to measure return on investment of my marketing, and that was the one step she missed because it's asking all this bullshit that I don't want. So it's too much. And I think the dental practice management software is the most ripe for a complete disruption where that damn software could fit on my iPhone and an iPad. and get rid
Yes.
of all those damn terminals,
Yeah.
and you just sit there with your iPad in there, touch screen,
Agree.
bing, 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 bing. You could reprogram what you need in a fraction of the time, make it faster, easier, lower cost, higher quality, keep it simple, stupid, get rid
Yeah.
of every single thing. And then I think for marketing purposes, what they should do is like they should hook up with you and say, okay, if you're a consultant of Sean Crabtree, then click here and it'll set up the format for his operation logistics. But if your favorite consultant is Susie Q, well then click that. So then those people would come in the office and say, okay, to do this right, I need this. What about dashboards? Do you have any dashboards that you like, or
You know, there are several out there. I've not, to be honest with you, I've not found one that I'm super impressed with. But now back to Edison that you were just talking about. Listen, these guys have, again, they've been in business for over 100 years. These guys have put the time into that thing, and they're open enough to hear some suggestions, and they're flexible enough to be able to make changes, which is something that you don't get with the other guys as well. Unfortunately, when we run reports, we have to run 2 or sometimes 3 reports. You'll cross-reference them just to figure out what the heck is going on. And like you said, it's just too much. I don't have a particular dashboard that I think things are certainly moving in the industry that way. We're kind of working on maybe creating our own dashboard that would be specific to what it is that we're looking for.
I came out with my own.
Did you?
Yeah, it's just one of those easy sketch deals with those 2 buttons.
Right.
And you just try. You just draw. I used to do the most marvelous paintings on an easy sketch, and then we had an earthquake of 4 and erased all my paintings. He's calling it Edison. I love Edison. So did Henry Ford. Henry Ford actually bought Edison's house and moved it brick by brick to the Henry Ford Museum. I love Edison's quotes. I haven't failed. I just found 10,000 ways that won't work. His other quote, many of life's failures are people who did not realize how close they were to success when they gave up. And then his other one, when you have exhausted all possibilities, remember this, you haven't. And I'm telling you that when you're 55 and you've raised 4 kids and now you got grandchildren, you've been working with dentists for 30 years, the number one enemy is the demons that live between your ears. You have all these self-limiting beliefs, and you keep saying that you could never do this and you could never do that, and you could never place an implant, you can't pull out a root canal, you could never tell that hygienist what you really, I mean, you just get up in the morning and have, I mean, for Conor McGregor are both beating this shit out of you. Conor McGregor's your right ear and Mayweather's your left ear, and you just beat the crap out of yourself all day long, telling yourself
before you get started. That's right.
Yeah.
Before you get started.
By the way, did you watch the last fight, the Conley and Triple G?
I didn't see that. Boy, that's the social media is afire with that thing. I understand that people weren't happy with the outcome of that.
You know what? I have to tell you, sitting chairside at some of those fights and at the Arizona Cardinal stuff. So when you're on TV, you see a tap or a jab, but when you're within 10 feet of that ring, it might have sounded like
feel the sweat, right?
It might have sounded like a baseball bat hitting a heavy bag. I mean, if you go to the Arizona Cardinals game and sit in the first couple rows and you're right at the line of scrimmage, I mean, it sounds like a car wreck on every play. So that lady might have been hearing every time you hit me, it was like boom. And every time I hit you, there was no sound. So sound's a big deal. Also, they also are hearing the conversations and the ring and the corners, like dude, you just lost that round. What's wrong with you? Well, if she just hears the coach say you just lost that round, and then every time the other guy hit you, it was thug. I mean, so sitting there watching that on a big screen TV 1,000 miles away from the fight is a totally different experience.
Different thing.
So I want to ask you final question. I can't believe we went over an hour, man. I could talk to you for 40 days and 40 nights.
I could do the same, Howard. I wish I was there with you in person.
Let's plug your podcast. Have you started your podcast, or do you have any episodes out?
We've got a couple that should be out here in the next month.
Okay.
Yep.
Well,
Dental Profits.
It's called what?
It's called Dental Profits.
And is profit P spelled like a prophet in the Bible, or profit would is it PROFIT or PROPHET?
It's PROFIT, and my business partner and I would be the PHET. We would be the Dental Profits, but it's all about how to get you with happier clients, better results, and making more money. And unfortunately, that making more money concept is something that a lot of dentists are not really focused on. Maybe because of what you said. I mean, there's a lot of limiting beliefs out there. There's a lot of people who are beating themselves up for no reason. This show is really all about getting you to the point where you can understand it's not nearly as difficult as you think, and you deserve it, doggone it. You just got to get out of your head.
So your website is thecrabtreegroup.com. This is Dentistry Uncensored. So how much is your services? What if I'm listening to you and I'm saying I want you to come out and help me? First of all, how do they contact you?
Well, the best way to do it is to go to our website, thecrabtreegroup.com, and of course we've got all sorts of ways that you can work with us. We work with very few people one-on-one. I mean, we never have more than about 40 dentists that we're working with at any one time. But we've got all sorts of ways that you connect. We have different levels of engagement with us in terms of coursework that we have coming out, and hope to have my book released here not too long from now.
So. And what's your book called?
We're still working on that.
Well, you know how I'm writing a new book. You know how the How to Win Friends and Influence People?
Right.
I'm gonna call mine How to Treat People by Ted Bundy, and I thought I'd do the opposite of it. Teach you what not to do.
We're thinking about calling it price has no value, but value is priceless.
Nice. But how much does it cost to use you as a client? Service.
In terms of the full-blown program?
Yeah.
It really just depends on what's going on, what you have, where it is that you want to be, and where it is that you currently are, and where it is that you want to go. We've got guys that will engage with us anywhere from $1,000 to $7,000 a month. It really just depends.
Depends on what you're trying to solve.
Well, it depends on where they are and where it is that they want to be.
Okay.
You mentioned a great point. The average dentist in the U.S. is producing about $700,000, and that stat has been around for a few years. That's unfortunately, but that doesn't mean that there are not plenty of guys out there that are doing. We got a single doctor practice that's doing about $2.6 million. I've got a practice in Texas that his goal was to take a week off a month. So since we've been working together for about 6 years, and so every month he goes down to the Keys. He works 12 days a month, and he'll do about $2 million a year.
Oh, man, the Keys just got wiped out.
Yeah, he was actually really lucky. It was one of those things, man. I mean, his house was okay, but in his neighborhood, I mean, the whole thing was just demolished. And unfortunately, his family all has second homes in that neighborhood. He told me his jet skis were just like not there anymore. Dock is just upside down. But the interesting thing was none of his windows were even blown out. The place was flooded on the bottom floor, but the windows they're still intact.
Yeah, those storms are weird. I remember growing up in Kansas, you'd see a tornado. Sometimes a tornado would go through some small town. It looked like a lawnmower went through. And then other times it'd go over a town, and one house is perfectly normal, and the house on every side of it looks like it was blown up with a bomb. The wind is so weird. But hey, shout out to all the dentists in Houston, Orlando, Miami, Florida, the Keys. Tough spot. Hang in there, guys. But hey, Sean, love you to death. Been a big fan of yours for years. Get Dawn Brunker to come on and talk about Edison, and thanks for all you do for dentistry. When you come out with your new book, email me the JPEG and all that stuff, and we'll do a review on it, and I'll help and post it on Dental Town. Get on there and if you're shy to post on Dental Town, just say Howard made me do it, and then they'll all feel sorry for you.
Howard, listen, I want you to know that what you're doing for these young guys out there and the things that you're preaching, they need to listen. I think you're creating a paradigm shift for a lot of people. And it's been a real honor to be with you. I want you to know that.
Ah,
Thank you.
thanks a lot, man. Now I got to go to my second job as a Chippendale dancer, so I'll have to talk to you later. Have a rockin' hot day.